Welcome back to Night Mode Lore. Tonight, we're exploring the complete story of Henry Emily, the creator who lost everything, the dreamer whose dream became nightmare, the father whose daughter was murdered, the partner whose partner betrayed him, the engineer whose creations were corrupted, the good man whose technology enabled evil, the hero who chose sacrifice over survival. Henry Emily being examined tonight as tragic figure, as sympathetic character, as person who tried to do good and experienced horror, who built entertainment and watched it become death trap, who created joy and saw it transform into suffering. Henry being explored not as villain, but as victim, not as evil, but as grief, not as monster, but as father who lost child, as creator whose creations were perverted, as partner whose trust was betrayed, as person who spent decades living with consequences of another's evil, living with guilt for technology that enabled murder, living with knowledge that his animatronics contained murdered children, that his business partner killed his daughter, that his dream was corrupted into nightmare by person he trusted. Henry Emily being examined tonight comprehensively. His complete story from beginning to end, from partnership with William Afton to sacrifice in burning building, from creating Fredbear's family diner to destroying Freddy Fazbear's pizza place, from innocent engineer building entertainment to destroyer burning everything to end horror. Henry's journey being tragic, being sympathetic, being story of good person experiencing evil, of creator taking responsibility, of father trying to free daughter's spirit, of hero choosing death to end what he helped create. This is comprehensive exploration of Henry Emily's life and sacrifice, examining who he was before tragedy, what his partnership with William Afton was like, how he created animatronic entertainment with pure intentions, how he loved his daughter Charlotte, how everything changed when she was murdered, how discovering William was killer transformed him, how he lived with decades of guilt and grief, how he eventually planned comprehensive trap, how he designed Freddy Fazbear's pizza place specifically to gather all possessed animatronics, how he created Lefty to capture Charlotte's spirit, how he ensured Labyrinth prevented escape, how he prepared for his own death, how he delivered final speech, how he burned everything, how he sacrificed himself to end horror, examining not just what Henry did but why, not just events but emotions, not just timeline but tragedy, understanding Henry as person, as father, as creator, as partner, as victim, as hero, as man who took responsibility, who chose sacrifice, who tried to fix what was broken, even though breaking wasn't his fault. Henry being examined as sympathetic character, as good person in evil situation, as creator trying to destroy what his creation enabled, as father trying to free daughter, as partner trying to stop former, friend, as hero choosing death, being explored with compassion, with recognition of his tragedy, with understanding of his sacrifice. Henry Emily deserving this, deserving comprehensive examination, deserving to be understood as tragic hero rather than background character, deserving recognition for his sacrifice, his planning, his decades of suffering, his ultimate choice to die to end horror. Whether you're discovering Henry's story for first time, revisiting familiar tragedy as you drift towards sleep, or simply letting exploration wash over you as consciousness fades, this will carry you through his complete journey, every element of his creation, every aspect of his loss, every year of his guilt, every detail of his plan, every word of his speech, every moment of his sacrifice, being comprehensive examination designed to give you complete understanding while gently facilitating rest, being story told with appropriate sadness, despite tragedy. Being analysis delivered soothingly despite heartbreak. Being night mode law's approach. Comprehensive coverage in sleep facilitating format, respecting both content and purpose, treating Henry's story seriously while acknowledging you're here to rest, to sleep, to find calm in detailed storytelling, in complete examination, in thorough analysis that engages mind just enough to quiet anxious thoughts, but not so much that sleep becomes impossible. Being exactly what you need. Being Henry Emily's complete story. Being creator's full tragedy. Being father's journey told completely, told gently, told for sleep. Henry deserving this respect, deserving this comprehensive telling, deserving to be understood fully, to be examined thoroughly, to be remembered as hero, as father, as creator, as person who sacrificed everything to end horror, being examined now with appropriate compassion, appropriate recognition, appropriate honor for his tragedy and his heroism. Let's begin this journey through Henry's story, understanding that we start not with tragedy, but with dream, not with loss, but with hope, not with sacrifice, but with creation. Henry Emily, in early 1970s, being engineer, being roboticist, being person with vision of bringing joy to children through animatronic entertainment, being dreamer, being creator, being person with pure intentions, with genuine desire to make children happy, with wholesome motivation, being examined first as dreamer before examining him as grieving father, as creator before destroyer, as partner before betrayed friend, understanding who Henry was before everything went wrong, before Charlotte died, before William's evil was revealed, before decades of guilt began, before sacrifice became necessary, being Henry Emily at beginning, being explored now, being understood as foundation for comprehending his complete tragedy, for appreciating his sacrifice, for recognizing his heroism, beginning now, beginning with dreamer, with creator, with Henry Emily before horror, being examined, comprehensively, being told for sleep, being Henry's complete story starting now. Part 1. The Dreamer, Creating Joy, 1970s, early 1980s. As we begin this exploration, as sleep starts to pull you deeper, let us travel back to beginning, to early 1970s, to time before horror, before tragedy, before Henry Emily became grieving father and destroyer, examining who he was before, what drove him, what his dreams were. Henry in 1970s being engineer with vision, being roboticist with talent, being person who looked at emerging technology and saw possibility for entertainment, for bringing joy to children, for creating something magical, something wonderful, something that would make families happy. Henry Emily being examined now as dreamer, as creator, as person with pure intentions, with genuine desire to do good, to build something positive, to contribute something valuable to world. Henry's motivation being examined as wholesome, as innocent, as exactly what it appeared to be. Henry wanting to create entertainment that delighted children, that made them laugh, that brought happiness to families, being person whose goals were pure, whose intentions were good, whose dream was innocent, being stark contrast to William Afton, being partner who had different motivations, darker purposes, corrupted goals. Henry and William being examined as contrasting creators, as two engineers with different souls. Henry being good creator, being person building for right reasons, being examined now as foundation, as understanding who he was before tragedy, before loss transformed him, before guilt weighed on him, before sacrifice became necessary, being Henry Emily as dreamer, as creator, as beginning. Henry's vision, entertainment through technology. Henry Emily had vision of animatronic entertainment, being idea that was innovative for time, being use of robotics and engineering to create mechanical performers that could entertain children, that could sing and move and interact, that could be characters children loved, being vision that combined Henry's engineering talent with his desire to bring joy, being dream that was both technically ambitious and emotionally pure. Henry seeing possibility in animatronic technology, seeing way to create entertainment that was novel, impressive, engaging, being different from traditional entertainment, being use of emerging robotics technology to create something children had never seen before. Mechanical performers that moved like living things, that had personalities, that could be beloved characters. Henry's vision being examined as genuine, as pure, as motivated by desire to create happiness, to build something that delighted children, that brought families together, that created positive memories. Henry being person who looked at technology and saw opportunity to do good, to create joy, to build something valuable, being examined as creator with right motivations, with pure intentions, with wholesome goals. Henry's dream being animatronic entertainment that made children happy, that brought joy to families, that was safe and fun and magical, being vision that would be corrupted by William, that would be perverted into horror, but starting as pure dream, as innocent vision, as Henry Emily wanting to create something good, being examined as foundation, as understanding his tragedy, recognizing that he started with best intentions, with purest goals, with dream of bringing joy, being important for understanding later guilt, later recognition that his creations enabled evil, later choice to destroy everything. Henry starting as dreamer, as creator, as person with vision of joy. Partnership with William Afton. Two engineers, different souls. Henry Emily partnered with William Afton to create Fredbear's Family Diner. Two engineers combining skills to build business, to create restaurant featuring animatronic entertainment. Partnership seeming productive initially, seeming beneficial. Two talented engineers working together, complementing each other's skills. Henry being creative genius, being person who designed animatronics with artistry, with genuine vision for entertainment, with desire to create characters children would love. William being technical partner, being person who could implement Henry's designs, who could solve engineering problems, who could build functioning animatronics from concepts. Their partnership being examined as collaboration between two skilled people, but being collaboration between two fundamentally different people. Henry having pure motivations, Henry wanting to create joy, Henry being driven by desire to entertain and delight, William's motivations being unclear, being ambiguous, being possibly corrupted from beginning, William's reasons for pursuing animatronic entertainment being uncertain, being questionable, possibly being less about bringing joy and more about opportunity, about access to children, about creating infrastructure he could exploit. William's participation being examined as potentially corrupted from start, being motivated by purposes Henry didn't understand, didn't suspect, didn't recognize until too late, until after Charlotte died, until after William's true nature revealed itself. The partnership in early years being productive, being successful, Henry and William working together to design animatronics, to create Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, to build Fredbear's Family Diner, to establish business, their collaboration creating something that worked, that attracted customers, that entertained children, partnership appearing normal on surface, appearing to be two engineers building business together, Henry not recognizing William's darkness, not suspecting his partner of harboring evil intentions, not understanding that person he trusted was becoming or already was monster. Henry being examined as trusting person, as believing in people, as assuming best of partner, as not recognizing danger until too late, being character flaw perhaps, being innocence, being trust that would be betrayed catastrophically. Henry trusting William, working with William, partnering with William, not knowing he was collaborating with person who would murder children, who would kill Henry's own daughter, who would corrupt everything Henry built, who would pervert Henry's dream into nightmare, partnership being examined as tragic, as Henry's trust being misplaced, as collaboration between good and evil, between creator and destroyer, between person building for right reasons and person whose reasons were wrong, dark, corrupted, Henry and William being partners, being friends possibly, being people working together, Henry not knowing his partner's true nature, not understanding until Charlotte died, until daughter was murdered, until partner became known as killer, being examined as tragic partnership, as trust betrayed, as friendship corrupted, as collaboration that enabled horror. Creating Fredbear's Family Diner, 1973. Fredbear's Family Diner opened in 1973, being first location, being origin of everything, being Henry and William's vision made real. Restaurant featuring Fredbear and Spring Bonnie as animatronic performers, being Yellow Bear and Yellow Rabbit, being characters designed by Henry, brought to life by Henry's engineering and William's technical implementation, being Springlock suits, being hybrid technology allowing suits to function as both animatronics and wearable costumes, being innovative design, being achievement in robotics, being dangerous technology, but being considered acceptable, entertainment value outweighing safety concerns in their assessment, Springlock suits being Henry's design possibly, being technology he created, being innovation that was brilliant and deadly, being examined as beginning of pattern, Henry creating technology that would later facilitate harm, Springlocks being dangerous, being capable of killing if they failed, being inherently risky design, but being created for entertainment purposes, being intended for good, being meant to bring joy, being perverted later into murder weapon, William using Spring Bonnie to lure children, using Henry's creation to commit crimes, using technology meant for entertainment to enable murder, being pattern that would define Henry's tragedy, his creations being corrupted, his technology being used for evil, his innovations being perverted by partner. Fredbear's Family Diner being success, being popular with families, being novel entertainment attracting customers, children loving Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, being delighted by animatronic performers, being fascinated by mechanical characters, Henry's vision being realized, his dream being achieved, restaurant bringing joy to children exactly as Henry intended, exactly as he hoped, families coming to diner, children laughing, parties being held, entertainment being provided, being exactly what Henry wanted, being pure realization of pure dream, being success that validated Henry's vision, that proved animatronic entertainment worked, that demonstrated children loved mechanical performers, being foundation for expansion, for growth, for plans to open more locations, to create more characters, to build entertainment empire. Henry in early years being successful, being validated, being watching his dream work, being seeing children happy because of what he created, being experiencing satisfaction of creator seeing creation bring joy, being examined as happy period, as time before tragedy, as years when Henry's life was good, when his vision was pure, when his partnership seemed productive, when his daughter was alive, when everything was innocent, when dream was still dream rather than nightmare, being examined as foundation, as understanding what Henry was before loss, before guilt, before sacrifice, being dreamer in 1973, being creator seeing dream realized, being Henry Emily successful and innocent. Henry as father, Charlotte Emily. Henry Emily was father to Charlotte, being little girl, being daughter he loved, being child who mattered more to him than anything. Henry being examined as loving father, as devoted parent, as person whose daughter was central to his life, to his happiness, to his identity. Charlotte being Henry's daughter, being child he protected, being person he loved absolutely, being examined as Henry's vulnerability, as his weakness that William would exploit, as person whose death would destroy Henry, would transform him, would motivate everything that followed. Henry's relationship with Charlotte being examined as loving, as genuine father-daughter bond, as Henry being good father, being present parent, being person who cared for daughter, who wanted her safe, who loved her completely, being stark contrast to William's parenting, to William's neglect of his own children. Henry being examined as good parent, as loving father, as person who prioritized daughter, who wanted her protected, who tried to keep her safe, creating security puppet, specifically to protect Charlotte, designing animatronic whose purpose was keeping daughter safe, being evidence of Henry's love, of his desire to protect, of his awareness that daughter needed protection. Henry creating security puppet as guardian for Charlotte, as mechanical protector programmed to keep her safe, being ironic later, being tragic, security puppet failing, being blocked by children during party, being unable to reach Charlotte in time, failing in purpose, Henry's creation failing to protect what mattered most, being examined as tragic irony, as Henry creating protection that failed, as his engineering unable to save daughter, being pattern of his technology failing to prevent evil, failing to protect innocence. Charlotte being important to understanding Henry's later actions, later guilt, later sacrifice. Charlotte's death being transformation point, being moment that changed everything, being loss that defined rest of Henry's life. Henry being examined as father who lost daughter, as parent experiencing worst tragedy, as person whose child was murdered, being grief absolute, being loss complete, being tragedy that overshadowed everything else. Charlotte being murdered by William, by Henry's partner, by person he trusted, being betrayal compounding loss, being tragedy multiplied by who committed it. Henry losing daughter being terrible enough, discovering partner killed daughter being additional horror, being betrayal layered on grief, being trust destroyed simultaneously with daughter's life ending. Henry's relationship with Charlotte being examined as foundation for understanding his later actions, his decades of guilt, his eventual sacrifice. Henry trying to free Charlotte's spirit being motivation for FNAF 6's trap. Henry staying in burning building being father ensuring daughter could rest. Henry's sacrifice being ultimately about Charlotte, about freeing her, about giving her peace, about father's final act being liberation of daughter's spirit, being examined as central motivation, as driving force behind Henry's eventual plan. Charlotte being what mattered to Henry, being why he eventually chose destruction, being why he sacrificed himself, being person he loved most, being daughter whose death motivated everything, being examined as crucial element of Henry's story, understanding that Charlotte was everything to Henry, that losing her destroyed him, that freeing her spirit motivated his sacrifice. The dream flourishes, plans for expansion. In late 1970s and early 1980s, Fredbear's family diner was successful enough to plan expansion, Henry and William considering opening larger location, considering creating new animatronic characters, considering building Freddy Fazbear's Pizza as bigger restaurant with more performers, being business success, being partnership, being productive, being dream growing, Henry's vision expanding, being examined as peak of success, as time when everything seemed to be working, when dream was becoming reality, when animatronic entertainment was proving successful, when families loved what they created, when children were delighted by mechanical performers, when business was profitable, when future looked bright. Henry, in this period, being successful creator, being validated engineer, being person whose dream was working, whose vision was being realized, whose technology was bringing joy, being examined as final normal period, as last years before everything went wrong, before Charlotte died, before William's evil was revealed, before dream became nightmare, being calm before storm, being success before tragedy, being happiness before grief. Henry planning expansion, planning growth, planning future, not knowing what was coming, not suspecting partner, not understanding danger, being innocent, being trusting, being person who believed in good, who assumed best, who didn't recognize evil in partner, being examined as tragic, innocence, as trust that would be betrayed, as hope that would be destroyed. The expansion plans including creating new characters, designing Freddy Fazbear, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, being Henry's creative work, being his designs, being characters he created with same pure intention as Fredbear, wanting to entertain children, wanting to bring joy, wanting to create beloved characters that delighted families. Henry's creative work being examined as pure, as motivated by right reasons, as genuine desire to create entertainment. His new characters being designed for happiness, being meant to perform, to entertain, to be loved, being created with innocence, with wholesome purpose, being characters that would later become haunted, that would contain murdered children's spirits, that would be corrupted by William's crimes, but being created by Henry with pure intentions, with desire to bring joy, being examined as tragic, as Henry's innocent creations becoming vessels for horror, as his characters designed for entertainment becoming possessed by murdered children, as his pure vision being corrupted completely by William's evil, being pattern defining Henry's tragedy, his good work enabling bad outcomes, his innocent creations facilitating horror, his pure technology being perverted, being examined as core of Henry's guilt, of his later understanding that his creations enabled murder, that his animatronics contained victims, that his technology was corrupted, being foundation for understanding why Henry eventually chose to destroy everything, why he burned his own creations, why he sacrificed dream he built. Henry creating with innocence, building with good intentions, designing for joy, not knowing his creations would become nightmares, not suspecting they would contain murdered children, not understanding how completely William would corrupt everything. Let this dream rest. As this section concludes, as sleep deepens around you, let Henry's early years settle into understanding, knowing he was dreamer, knowing he created with pure intentions, knowing he partnered with William without understanding his darkness, knowing he loved Charlotte completely, knowing he planned expansion with optimism, knowing these were years before tragedy, before loss, before guilt, before sacrifice, being foundation for understanding what came next, for comprehending his transformation, for recognizing his eventual heroism, Henry starting as innocent creator, as loving father, as trusting partner, being examined comprehensively now, being understood as beginning, being ready to continue to Charlotte's death, to discovery of William's evil, to transformation from dreamer to destroyer, being explored after rest, after sleep, after letting this foundation settle, being ready to continue soon, being Henry's tragedy beginning, being examined after rest. Part 2. The Loss, Charlotte's Death and Discovery, 1983-1985. As we continue deeper into Henry's story, as consciousness drifts further toward rest, we examine the period that destroyed Henry, the years when everything changed, when daughter was murdered, when partner was revealed as killer, when dream became nightmare, when innocent creator became grieving father, when trust was shattered, when guilt began, being years between 1983 and 1985, being crucial for understanding Henry, being transformation period, being time when Henry Emily became who he would remain, being person defined by loss, by betrayal, by guilt, by determination to eventually fix what was broken, being examined now as turning point, as tragedy, as destruction of innocent man, as murder of daughter and revelation of partner's evil simultaneously destroying Henry, transforming him, creating person who would eventually sacrifice himself, being explored comprehensively now. Charlotte's murder, the night everything changed, 1983-1984. Charlotte Emily was murdered by William Afton. Sometime between 1983 and 1984, being first victim, being Henry's daughter, being little girl killed by her father's partner, being child murdered outside restaurant, while party continued inside, Charlotte being left outside, being alone, being vulnerable, William approaching her, killing her, murdering Henry's daughter, being examined as worst moment of Henry's life, as absolute tragedy, as loss that would define everything after, Charlotte dying, Charlotte being murdered, Charlotte being killed by William, by person Henry trusted, by his partner, by his friend possibly, being betrayal compounding tragedy, being trust destroyed simultaneously with daughter's life ending. Henry discovering Charlotte was dead, finding out daughter was murdered, learning child was killed, being moment examined as complete destruction, as shattering of Henry's world, as transformation from successful creator to grieving father, from innocent dreamer to person living with loss, from trusting partner to person betrayed. Charlotte's death being everything to Henry, being loss that mattered more than anything else, being tragedy that overshadowed all other concerns, all other events, all other aspects of life. Henry losing Charlotte being examined as defining moment, as point where everything changed, where person he was died and person he became was born, where dreamer became griever, where creator became destroyer eventually, where innocent became guilty, not guilty of crime, but guilty of feeling responsible, of creating technology that enabled horror, of partnering with murderer, of failing to protect daughter despite creating security puppet for that purpose. The security puppet, failing to protect Charlotte, being examined as additional layer of tragedy, as Henry's creation failing in its most important purpose. Security puppet being designed specifically to keep Charlotte safe, being animatronic programmed to protect her, being Henry's engineering applied to daughter's safety, being attempt to use his skills to keep what mattered most secure, security puppet failing, being blocked during party, being unable to reach Charlotte in time, Henry's creation failing to save daughter, being tragic irony, being painful failure, being Henry's technology unable to prevent evil, unable to protect innocence, being pattern that would haunt Henry, that would contribute to guilt, that would reinforce feeling that his creations enabled horror rather than preventing it. Security puppet reaching Charlotte too late, finding daughter dead, Charlotte's spirit binding to puppet, possessing security puppet, becoming the puppet, being first possession, being proof that murdered children's spirits bound to animatronics, being discovery that would be important later, being mechanism William would exploit, being pattern Charlotte's death established, Henry's daughter becoming first possessed animatronic, becoming first spirit bound to machine, being tragic transformation, being Charlotte unable to rest, being daughter trapped in mechanical form, being child's consciousness continuing in animatronic, being examined as horror, as tragedy, as Charlotte being unable to move on, being bound to security puppet, being trapped, being unable to find peace. Discovering William's evil, partner revealed as killer. Henry discovering William was murderer being examined as betrayal absolute, as trust completely destroyed, as partnership revealed as collaboration with monster. How Henry discovered this being unclear, being ambiguous, possibly William being suspect, possibly evidence pointing toward him, possibly Henry understanding gradually, possibly recognizing eventually that partner killed daughter, the discovery being examined as additional trauma, as betrayal layered on grief, as loss compounded by who caused it. Henry trusted William. Henry partnered with William. Henry built business with William. Henry created animatronics with William. Discovering William murdered Charlotte, being destruction of everything. Being revelation that partner was monster, that person he trusted was killer, that collaboration was with evil. Being examined as complete betrayal, as trust shattered, as friendship destroyed if friendship existed, as partnership revealed as collaboration with murderer. Henry's response being examined as crucial, as important for understanding character. Henry knowing William killed Charlotte, but being unable to prove it, being unable to get justice through official channels, being unable to prosecute, being unable to ensure William faced consequences, evidence being insufficient, proof being lacking, official system failing, William avoiding prosecution, avoiding arrest, avoiding consequences, Henry knowing truth, but being unable to make others know it, being unable to ensure justice, being examined as additional frustration, as additional tragedy, as Henry living with knowledge but being powerless to act, being unable to ensure William faced justice, being living with murderer continuing to exist freely, continuing to be threat, continuing to be present. Henry's immediate response being unclear, being ambiguous, possibly distancing from William, possibly ending partnership formally or informally, possibly continuing to be involved with business for reasons unclear, possibly maintaining some connection to investigate, to gather evidence, to plan eventually, to prepare for future action. Being unclear what Henry did immediately after discovering William killed Charlotte. Being FNAF maintaining ambiguity, but being clear that Henry knew, that Henry understood William was murderer, that Henry lived with this knowledge for decades, that Henry eventually acted, eventually created trap, eventually sacrificed himself. Henry's long-term response being comprehensive, being planning for years, being designing ultimate solution, but immediate response being uncertain, being unclear how Henry managed in immediate aftermath, how he dealt with grief and betrayal simultaneously, how he continued living knowing partner killed daughter, how he functioned knowing murderer was free, being examined as period of incredible suffering, of grief combined with betrayal, of loss combined with knowledge that killer was unpunished, being Henry's worst period, being immediate aftermath of Charlotte's death and discovery of William's guilt, being time of absolute suffering, being examined as crucial for understanding Henry's later actions, his decades of planning, his eventual sacrifice, understanding that Henry lived with grief and knowledge for decades before acting, before creating Trap, before burning everything. The missing children incident, Henry's technology corrupted, 1985. In 1985, William murdered 5 more children at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Being missing children incident, being William using Spring Bonnie costume to lure victims, being children trusting character Henry helped design, being William exploiting trust in entertainment characters to commit murders, being Henry's creations being used for evil, being examined as compounding Henry's guilt, as reinforcing pattern of his technology enabling horror, William using Spring Bonnie, using costume Henry co-created, using animatronic meant for entertainment, using character designed to bring joy, using it to lure children to deaths, being perversion of Henry's creation, being corruption of his work, being use of technology meant for good to enable evil, being pattern that would define Henry's guilt, that would motivate his eventual destruction of everything, Gabriel and Jeremy and Susie and Fritz and Cassidy being murdered, being 5 children dying, being 5 more victims, being William's crimes continuing, being expanding, being escalating from Charlotte's single death to 5 deaths, being mass murder, being horror multiplying, children's bodies being stuffed into animatronic suits, into Freddy and Bonnie and Chica and Foxy and Golden Freddy, being hidden inside Henry's creations, being concealed in the animatronics Henry designed, being Henry's technology being used not just to lure victims, but to hide them, to conceal evidence, to facilitate murder comprehensively, being examined as multiple layers of corruption, Henry's animatronics being used to lure children, to hide bodies, to contain spirits after possession occurred. The children's spirits possessing animatronics being examined as Henry's creations becoming haunted, as his entertainment characters becoming possessed by murdered children, as his technology designed for joy containing tragedy, being animatronics Henry created with pure intentions, being corrupted into vessels for murdered children's spirits, being complete perversion of purpose, being total corruption of function, Henry's creations meant to bring happiness containing children who died seeking happiness, being tragic irony, being cruel corruption, being pattern Henry would live with, would understand, would feel guilty about for decades, Henry knowing his animatronics contained murdered children, knowing his creations were haunted, knowing his technology facilitated evil, being guilt examined as comprehensive, as Henry feeling responsible even though he didn't commit crimes, even though evil was William's, even though Henry was victim of betrayal rather than perpetrator of horror. Henry feeling responsible because technology was his, because creations were his, because dream was his, because partnership with William was his choice, because everything William corrupted was built by Henry or built with Henry, being guilt that was perhaps irrational, being responsibility taken for things not his fault, being Henry's character examined as person who took accountability even for others' evil, when that evil used his technology, his creations, his dream, being pattern that would lead to sacrifice, to choosing destruction, to burning everything to end horror, being foundation for understanding Henry's eventual choice, his willingness to destroy what he built, his sacrifice of dream he created, being motivated by guilt, by responsibility, by understanding that his creations enabled horror even if he never intended it, never wanted it, never chose it, being examined comprehensively, living with knowledge. Years of guilt and planning. Henry lived with knowledge that William murdered children, that partner was killer, that daughter was first victim, that 5 more children died, that all deaths used Henry's technology, that animatronics Henry created contained murdered children, being years examined as psychological torture, as living with knowledge but being unable to act immediately, being unable to ensure justice through official channels, being unable to simply destroy William, being constrained by law, by evidence requirements, by system that required proof Henry couldn't provide, being examined as frustration, as helplessness, as knowing truth, but being unable to make truth matter officially. Henry living with this for years, for decades, from mid-1980s to 2023, being approximately 40 years of knowing, of guilt, of planning eventually, of preparing for sacrifice, being examined as long-term suffering, as decades of psychological weight, as Henry carrying guilt and knowledge for 40 years before acting, before creating trap, before burning everything, the delay being examined as possibly necessary, as Henry needing time to plan comprehensively, to design trap that would work, to ensure solution would succeed, or possibly being examined as Henry being unable to act earlier, being constrained by circumstances, by responsibilities, by needing resources, by requiring preparation, being unclear why Henry waited decades, being ambiguous whether delay was choice or necessity, but being clear that Henry lived with knowledge for decades, that he carried guilt for 40 years, that he eventually acted, that he created comprehensive solution, that he sacrificed himself. The psychological toll being examined as immense, as Henry living with grief for daughter, with betrayal by partner, with guilt for technology enabling horror, with knowledge that murderer was unpunished, with understanding that murdered children were trapped in his creations, being multiple layers of suffering, being comprehensive psychological burden, being examined as transforming Henry, as changing him from dreamer to person defined by loss and guilt, as creator who would eventually become destroyer, as father who would eventually sacrifice himself to free daughter. Being decades of suffering examined as motivation, as foundation for understanding sacrifice as reason. Henry chose death. Henry living with guilt for 40 years, making death acceptable, making sacrifice logical, making burning everything seem like necessary solution, being examined as Henry being destroyed by knowledge, by guilt, by grief, by decades of carrying responsibility for horrors he didn't commit, but enabled through his creations, being transformed into person who would choose destruction, who would burn everything, who would die to end what his partnership with William created, being examined as tragedy, as good person destroyed by evil person's crimes, as creator corrupted not into evil himself, but into person so burdened by guilt that death seemed like solution, like necessary sacrifice, like appropriate ending, being Henry in years between Charlotte's death and eventual trap, being examined as suffering, as guilt, as grief, as transformation, as preparation eventually for sacrifice. Let this loss rest, as this section concludes, understanding that Charlotte was murdered, that William was revealed as killer, that 5 more children died, that Henry's technology was corrupted comprehensively, that Henry lived with guilt and knowledge for decades, being transformation period examined thoroughly, being Henry changing from dreamer to griever, from creator to person carrying immense guilt, being foundation for understanding his eventual sacrifice, his comprehensive trap, his choice to die, being explored comprehensively, being ready to continue to examination of Henry's decades of living with consequences, of his eventual planning, of his trap, of his sacrifice, being examined after rest, after sleep, after letting this loss settle into understanding, being Henry's tragedy deepening, being continued after rest, Part 3. Living with Consequences. The Guilty Creator, 1985, 2020s. Continuing through Henry's story, examining decades he lived with knowledge, with guilt, with grief, being years from mid-1980s to 2020s, being examined as long period of suffering, of psychological burden, of Henry carrying weight of murdered children, of daughter's death, of technology corrupted, of partner's betrayal, being decades of consequences, of living with horror, of understanding his creations contain victims, being explored now as extended tragedy, as long-term suffering, as Henry's life defined by guilt and grief for 40 years. Watching horror continue, unable to stop it. Henry watched horror continue for decades, being unable to stop it immediately, being unable to prevent further suffering, watching possessed animatronics attack guards, watching locations continue operating despite hauntings, watching Fazbear Entertainment prioritize profit over accountability, watching system fail victims repeatedly, watching William avoid consequences, watching everything Henry created being corrupted into ongoing horror, being examined as helpless observation, as frustration, as understanding problems but being unable to fix them immediately. Henry knowing animatronics were haunted, knowing murdered children's spirits were trapped, knowing William killed his daughter and 5 more children, knowing all of this but being unable to ensure justice, unable to free spirits, unable to destroy William, unable to end horror, being constrained by circumstances, by law, by practical limitations, by needing to plan comprehensively, by requiring resources and preparation for eventual solution. Henry's decades of observation being examined as gathering information, as understanding situation completely, as preparing for eventual action, as planning trap that would work, as designing comprehensive solution, but also being examined as suffering, as watching horror continue, as observing victims suffering, as understanding murdered children were trapped but being unable to free them immediately. The locations continuing to operate being examined as source of frustration, as Henry watching his entertainment dream persist as nightmare. Watching Freddy Fazbear's Pizza continue existing despite being site of murders, despite containing possessed animatronics, despite being obviously haunted, Fazbear Entertainment continuing operations, prioritizing business over children's safety, suppressing information about murders, settling lawsuits quietly, avoiding investigation, being corporate evil that enabled William's crimes, that protected murderer, that allowed horror to continue. Henry watching this, understanding this, being unable to stop it through official channels, being unable to shut down locations, being unable to expose truth comprehensively, being examined as additional layer of frustration, as Henry watching corporate complicity, watching system failing, watching profit being prioritized over justice, over truth, over children's lives, being pattern of evil that extended beyond William, being systematic corruption that enabled individual evil. Henry observing this, understanding this, being unable to fix it through normal means, through official channels, through legal system, being eventually choosing extraordinary solution, choosing comprehensive destruction, choosing to burn everything because normal means failed, because system was corrupt, because only way to end horror was to destroy everything including himself. Creating Lefty, preparing to capture Charlotte. At some point during these decades, Henry created Lefty, being animatronic designed specifically to capture the puppet, to trap Charlotte's spirit, to bring daughter to eventual trap location. Lefty being examined as evidence of Henry's planning, as proof he was preparing for eventual action, as demonstration that he was designing solution. Lefty being sophisticated creation, being animatronic with specific purpose, being designed to attract puppet, to capture it, to contain it, to bring Charlotte to location where Henry could free her, being examined as father's plan to rescue daughter, as Henry designing way to bring Charlotte to burning building, to ensure daughter's spirit was present when fire occurred, when liberation happened, when everything ended. Lefty being painted black, being designed to look like Freddy, being music-based character appropriate for luring music-based puppet, being carefully designed trap specifically for Charlotte, being evidence that Henry's eventual plan was comprehensive, was carefully thought out, was prepared over years, was designed to succeed. Henry creating Lefty being examined as beginning of active preparation, as transition from observation to planning, as Henry moving from passive suffering to active preparation for ending horror. Lefty being tool for rescue, for freeing Charlotte, for ensuring daughter's spirit could be liberated, being examined as loving father's planning, as parent ensuring daughter could rest, as Henry's priority being Charlotte's freedom, Charlotte's peace, Charlotte's liberation from mechanical prison, designing the labyrinth, ensuring no escape. Henry designed Freddy Fazbear's pizza place as labyrinth, being building structured so possessed animatronics couldn't escape, so that once inside they would be trapped, would be contained until fire, until destruction, until ending, the labyrinth being examined as crucial element of plan, as Henry understanding that trap had to prevent escape, that burning building had to contain animatronics, that fire had to destroy everything without possibility of survival. Henry designing location, architecturally, to trap, to contain, to imprison, being evidence of comprehensive planning, of understanding that previous fires failed, that Springtrap survived Fazbear's fright fire, that William persisted beyond burning, that trap had to be better, had to be inescapable, had to ensure complete destruction. Henry's labyrinth being examined as engineering solution to supernatural problem, as use of architecture to contain possessed animatronics, as physical structure designed to prevent escape. Henry's speech mentioning labyrinth, acknowledging that he designed it specifically, that architecture was deliberate, was functional, was ensuring no animatronic could find exit, could escape building, could survive fire, being examined as Henry's engineering applied to destruction, as creator using skills to build trap, to design ending, to ensure solution worked, the labyrinth being testament to Henry's planning, to his thoroughness, to his determination that this solution would succeed where other attempts failed. The salvage system, bringing them. Henry's plan included salvage system, being mechanism where player character would find animatronics, would bring them into building, would position them for trap, being examined as clever solution to problem of gathering possessed animatronics, of bringing all victims and William to single location, of positioning everyone for comprehensive ending, the salvage system being explained through tutorials, through messages guiding player, through instructions that seemed like normal business operations but were actually Henry's trap functioning. Player salvaging Scrap Trap, William, Scrap Baby, Elizabeth, Molten Freddy, Lefty, Charlotte, bringing all possessed animatronics into building, into labyrinth, into trap, being examined as Henry's plan working, as animatronics being gathered, as everyone being present for ending, the salvage being clever because it used capitalism, used profit motive, used business operations as cover for trap, animatronics being brought in under pretense of salvaging valuable equipment, being positioned for destruction while appearing to be business assets. Henry using system against itself, using business mechanisms to gather victims of business's evil, being examined as ironic, as appropriate, as Henry using Fazbear Entertainment's approaches against horror, Fazbear Entertainment enabled. Decades of guilt, psychological burden. The decades between Charlotte's death and eventual trap being examined as extended psychological torture for Henry. Being 40 years of carrying guilt, being decades of knowing his technology-enabled horror, being years of understanding murdered children were trapped in his creations, being extended period of grief for daughter, of betrayal by partner, of watching horror continue, being examined as comprehensive psychological burden, as weight that would motivate sacrifice, that would make death seem acceptable, that would transform Henry into person willing to destroy everything including himself. The guilt being examined as perhaps irrational but understandable. Being Henry, feeling responsible for William's crimes, because crimes used Henry's technology, occurred at Henry's restaurants, corrupted Henry's creations, being examined as person taking responsibility beyond what was fair, beyond what was his fault, being pattern of good person feeling guilty for bad person's evil when evil used good person's work, Henry's guilt being examined as motivation for sacrifice, as reason he chose death, as psychological burden that made ending himself seem like appropriate conclusion, like necessary sacrifice, like taking responsibility for what his partnership with William created. Henry carrying this guilt for decades, being transformed by it, being changed from optimistic creator to person burdened by responsibility, to griever defined by loss, to person who would eventually choose destruction and death as solution, as ending, as taking ultimate responsibility by sacrificing himself to end horror. Let these decades rest, understanding Henry lived with consequences for 40 years, that he watched horror continue, that he created Lefty to capture Charlotte, that he designed Labyrinth to prevent escape, that he planned salvage system, that he carried immense psychological burden, being decades of guilt and grief examined thoroughly, being ready to continue to Henry's final plan, to Trap's execution, to speech, to sacrifice, to fire, being explored after rest, after sleep, after letting decades of suffering settle into understanding, being Henry's life of guilt examined comprehensively, being continued after rest. Part 4. The Plan, Designing the Trap, 2020s. As we continue toward Henry's sacrifice, examining his final plan, understanding comprehensive trap he created, exploring Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place as ultimate solution, being examined now as culmination of decades of planning, as Henry's engineering applied to ending horror, as creator becoming destroyer, as father preparing to free daughter, as hero choosing sacrifice, being explored thoroughly now. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place, the ultimate trap. Henry created Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place specifically as trap, being entire location designed to gather possessed animatronics, to contain them, to burn them, being comprehensive solution, being fake pizzeria, being business that seemed real but was actually mechanism for destruction. Henry designing everything, planning everything, creating location that appeared normal but was actually trap, being examined as culmination of decades of planning, as Henry's final action, as last creation being destroyer of all other creations, pizzeria being designed with multiple purposes, appearing to be legitimate restaurant, being functional enough to seem real, to attract animatronics, to fulfill purpose, but being actually trap, being building designed to burn, being structure meant to be destroyed, being temporary location whose only real purpose was gathering possessed animatronics and burning them. Henry's final creation being trap, being examined as creator's last work being destruction, as engineer's final design being mechanism for ending what earlier designs enabled, being appropriate, being tragic, being Henry's arc completing. Henry, who started by creating entertainment, ending by creating destroyer of entertainment, being examined as full circle, as creator becoming destroyer, as person who built everything choosing to burn everything, being Henry's complete transformation, being examined thoroughly, the location being functional enough to seem real, being apparently legitimate business, being having attractions, having salvage operations, having tasks player completed, being examined as convincing trap, as appearing normal enough to work, to attract animatronics, to function as gathering place, Henry's planning being comprehensive, being creating location that worked as trap while appearing as business, being fake pizzeria that seemed real, being destruction mechanism disguised as restaurant, being examined as clever, as sophisticated, as showing Henry's intelligence, his engineering skill, his planning ability, his determination to succeed, location including attractions, including maintenance tasks, including business operations, all being either functional parts of trap or being window dressing to maintain illusion, to ensure plan worked, to gather everyone needed for ending, being Henry's trap being comprehensive, being well designed, being created to succeed where other attempts failed, being designed to end horror completely, permanently, finally. The insanity ending. Henry's presence. Henry was present at location, being implied by various elements, being suggested by his control over systems, by his recorded messages, by his eventual speech. Henry being at pizzeria during a week of gameplay, being probably in building, being preparing for ending, being ensuring everything worked, being ready to sacrifice himself, being examined as Henry's commitment, as his presence meaning he would die, meaning he was choosing death, meaning sacrifice was deliberate, was accepted, was Henry's intention from beginning. Henry being at location being examined as evidence of planning, as proof of sacrifice being intentional, as showing that Henry designed trap knowing he would die in it, planning to die in it, choosing to die in it, being examined as suicide being planned, being deliberate choice, being sacrifice for purpose, being death to ensure trap worked, to ensure fire consumed everything, to ensure spirits were freed, to ensure William was destroyed. Henry's presence being his commitment, being proof he meant to die, being evidence that sacrifice was not accident, not failure, not something that happened to Henry, but something Henry chose. Being examined as intentional sacrifice, as heroic choice, as father dying to free daughter, as creator dying to destroy what creation enabled. The tutorial messages. Henry's voice. Henry's voice appeared in tutorial messages, being recordings guiding player through salvage operations, through maintenance tasks, through business operations, being examined as Henry teaching trap, as Henry ensuring player completed tasks that facilitated trap, that brought animatronics into building, that positioned them for burning. The messages being examined as Henry's presence, as his voice guiding toward ending, as creator explaining how destruction would work, the tone being professional, being businesslike, being instructional, being concealing true purpose beneath layer of apparent legitimacy. Henry teaching player how to salvage animatronics, being actually Henry teaching how to bring animatronics into trap, how to position them for destruction, being clever disguise, being business operations as cover for gathering victims for liberation. Henry's voice being calm, being professional, being giving no indication of true purpose until ending, until speech, until revelation that entire operation was trap. That pizzeria was designed for destruction, that Henry planned to burn everything. Preparation for sacrifice, knowing he would die. Henry prepared for his own death, being planning sacrifice from beginning, designing trap knowing he would die in it, being examined as intentional suicide, as chosen death, as sacrifice for purpose. Henry preparing by ensuring trap would work, by designing comprehensively, by planning for every contingency, by creating labyrinth that prevented escape, by ensuring fire would be hot enough, by positioning himself to remain in building, to die in fire, to ensure flames consumed everything including himself. Henry's preparation being examined as accepting death, as choosing death, as understanding that ending horror required his sacrifice, required him remaining in building, required him dying to ensure fire worked. Henry preparing psychologically for death, being person who spent decades carrying guilt, who was ready to die, who saw death as appropriate ending, as taking responsibility, as ultimate sacrifice, as giving life to end horror, to free spirits, to destroy William, to liberate Charlotte. Henry's preparation being comprehensive, being psychological and practical, being accepting death emotionally and planning for it practically, being examined as person ready to die, willing to die, choosing to die, being sacrifice, being heroism, being Henry's final choice, being examined thoroughly. Let this plan rest. Understanding. Henry created comprehensive trap, that Freddy Fazbear's pizza place was designed for destruction, that Henry was present in building, that his voice guided salvage operations, that he prepared for sacrifice, being plan examined thoroughly, being ready to continue to execution, to speech, to fire, to Henry's death, to sacrifice, being explored after rest, after sleep, after letting plans settle into understanding, being Henry's trap examined comprehensively, being continued after rest. Part 5. The Sacrifice. Henry's Final Act, 2023. As we approach the culmination of Henry's story, examining his sacrifice, his speech, his death in fire, being explored now as heroic ending, as father freeing daughter, as creator destroying creation, as person taking ultimate responsibility, being examined comprehensively now. Saturday, the ending begins. On Saturday, final day, ending began. Being when all animatronics were gathered, when all pieces were in place, when Henry's trap was ready to spring, when fire would start, when everything would end, being examined as culmination, as moment Henry prepared for, planned for, designed entire trap for. Saturday being when everything Henry worked toward would happen, when spirits would be freed, when William would be destroyed, when Charlotte would be liberated, when Henry would die. Being day everything changed, everything ended, everything was destroyed for purpose of liberation. Being examined as crucial day, as ending of decades of suffering, as conclusion of 40 years of guilt, as Henry's final act, as sacrifice, as destruction, as liberation, as ending everything. Henry's speech, final words to everyone. Henry's speech being examined comprehensively, being his final words, being addressed to everyone present, to all spirits, to William particularly, to Charlotte specifically, being examined as important moment, as Henry finally speaking, finally acting, finally explaining, finally confronting, Henry addressing spirits first, acknowledging them, speaking to children whose spirits were trapped, telling them it was time to rest, giving them permission to move on, to be free, to end suffering, being compassionate words, being recognition of victims, being Henry addressing murdered children with kindness, with sorrow, with understanding that they suffered, that they deserved peace, that they would be freed, Henry telling spirits they could rest, being important, being permission, being liberation, being father figure telling children they could stop fighting, could stop being trapped, could move on, being examined as compassionate, as kind, as Henry being good person even in final moments, being person who cared about victims, who wanted them freed, who designed traps specifically to liberate them. Henry addressing William, confronting former partner, speaking to murderer, to person who killed his daughter, to person who corrupted his creations, being examined as confrontation. As Henry finally telling William what he thought, what he knew, what William deserved. Henry telling William he knew he wouldn't be content to disappear, that William would continue if allowed, that William had to be destroyed, being acknowledgement of William's nature, being understanding that purple guy persisted, being recognition that trap had to work completely, that William had to be eliminated thoroughly, that fire had to destroy murderer, Henry confronting William being examined as final confrontation between partners, between creator and corrupter, between victim's father and murderer, between person building for good and person who destroyed good, being confrontation delayed for decades, being Henry finally speaking to William, finally telling him he knew, he understood, he was ending it. Henry's words to William being mixture of condemnation and pragmatism, being acknowledging William's evil while also recognizing that William had to be destroyed. That trap was necessary, that fire was solution, being examined as important confrontation, as Henry facing William finally, speaking to him directly, ensuring William knew what was happening, knew he was trapped, knew he would die, knew Henry had caught him finally. Henry addressing Charlotte, speaking to daughter, being examined as a most important part of speech, as father's final words to child, as Henry apologizing, explaining, giving permission to rest. Henry's words to Charlotte including, "I'm sorry that on that day, the day you were shut out and left to die, no one was there to lift you up into their arms the way you lifted others into yours," being examined as heartbreaking, as father acknowledging daughter's suffering, acknowledging that security puppet failed, that Charlotte died alone, that daughter became puppet, who protected others but needed protection herself. Henry acknowledging this, apologizing for it, recognizing Charlotte's heroism, her protection of other children, her mothering of murdered children's spirits, her being guardian despite being victim. Henry's words being examined as loving, as recognizing daughter, as seeing her, as understanding what she did, what she became, what she suffered. Henry telling Charlotte he's giving her way out, giving her escape, giving her freedom, being father ensuring daughter can rest, being parents' final act being liberation of child, being examined as crucial, as central motivation, as why Henry did everything, designed trap, planned sacrifice, chose death, being to free Charlotte, to give daughter peace, to ensure child could rest after decades of suffering. Henry's words to Charlotte being examined as loving father's final goodbye, as parent recognizing child, acknowledging suffering, providing escape, giving permission to rest, being examined as most important element of speech, as Henry's primary motivation revealed, as trap being ultimately about Charlotte, about freeing her, about father sacrificing himself to liberate daughter. The fire, comprehensive destruction, the fire starting, consuming building, burning everything, being examined as comprehensive destruction, as flames hot enough to destroy animatronics, to free spirits, to eliminate remnant, to destroy William, being fire Henry designed to work, to succeed, to end horror completely, heat being intense, being sustained, being thorough, fire consuming scrap trap, destroying William's corpse in suit, burning purple guy, eliminating child murderer, fire consuming scrap baby, destroying Elizabeth, freeing William's daughter, fire consuming molten Freddy, destroying composite animatronic, freeing spirits within, fire consuming Lefty, destroying puppet, freeing Charlotte, liberating Henry's daughter, fire destroying everything, consuming building, eliminating animatronics, supposedly freeing all spirits, supposedly ending all possession, supposedly liberating everyone, being examined as comprehensive, as thorough, as designed to succeed completely, Henry remaining in building, staying as fire burned, not escaping, not leaving, choosing to die, ensuring fire worked, ensuring everything burned, ensuring trap succeeded. Henry's choice to remain being examined as sacrifice, as ensuring destruction, as father staying to make certain daughter was freed, as creator staying to ensure creation was destroyed, as person taking responsibility by dying with what he helped create. Henry dying in fire, being burned, being destroyed, being consumed by flames, choosing this, accepting this, understanding this was necessary, being examined as sacrifice, as heroism, as ultimate act of responsibility. Henry dying to end horror, dying to free spirits, dying to destroy William, dying to liberate Charlotte, dying because trap had to work and his death ensured it worked, being examined as intentional sacrifice, as chosen death, as Henry's final act, as creator's last creation being his own destruction. Henry's death, the meaning of sacrifice. Henry, Emily died in fire he created, in trap he designed, in building he built specifically to burn, being examined as intentional death, as chosen sacrifice, as heroic act, as father dying to free daughter, as creator dying to destroy what creation enabled, as partner dying to eliminate former partner, as person dying to end horror, being examined as meaningful death, as sacrifice for purpose, as not suicide of despair but sacrifice of heroism, being Henry choosing death to achieve goal, to end suffering, to free spirits, to destroy William, being examined as ultimate taking of responsibility, as person who felt guilty for technology enabling evil, choosing to die to end that evil, choosing to destroy himself to destroy what he helped create, being examined as completion of arc, as dreamer who created joy, ending by destroying dream because dream was corrupted, as innocent creator becoming destroyer, as person who built everything choosing to burn everything, as ending matching beginning, as sacrifice being appropriate conclusion to story of guilt, of grief, of decades of suffering, Henry's death being examined as liberation for him too, as ending his suffering, as ending decades of guilt, as final act being freedom from psychological burden, from grief for daughter, from guilt for technology, from knowledge of horror. Henry dying being examined as multiple things simultaneously, being sacrificed to free others, being taking responsibility, being ending his own suffering, being father's final act for daughter, being creator's final act for creation, being hero's final act for victims, being person's final choice for himself, being examined comprehensively, being understood as meaningful death, a sacrifice that mattered, as heroic choice, as Henry Emily's final act being destruction of himself and everything he built to end horror that corrupted his dream. Ambiguity of success. Did it work? Whether Henry's sacrifice succeeded being examined as ambiguous, being uncertain, being FNAF refusing definite answer, whether spirits were truly freed being unclear, whether William was truly destroyed being debatable. Subsequent games suggesting William persisted as glitch trap, suggesting purple guy survived as digital consciousness, suggesting trap didn't end everything, suggesting horror continued, being examined as potential failure, as Henry's sacrifice perhaps not working completely, as William surviving even comprehensive trap, even being burned thoroughly, even being destroyed physically, continuing digitally, being examined as tragedy, as Henry's sacrifice being potentially insufficient, as horror persisting despite everything, or being examined as partial success, as spirits being freed even if William continued, as murdered children being liberated even if Purple Guy persisted, as Henry succeeding in freeing victims even if villain survived, being ambiguous, being unclear, being FNAF maintaining mystery, refusing certain closure, Henry's sacrifice being examined as either complete success or partial success or failure, being uncertain, being subject to interpretation, being depending on how one reads subsequent games, being examined as ambiguous ending, as appropriate for FNAF, as franchise refusing definite conclusions, as story maintaining uncertainty, Henry's death being examined as meaningful regardless of success, as sacrifice that mattered even if it didn't end everything, as heroic act even if it didn't achieve complete victory, being Henry trying, being Henry sacrificing himself, being Henry doing everything he could to end horror, being examined as valuable even if outcome uncertain, being heroic even if success ambiguous, being meaningful even if complete ending wasn't achieved, Henry's sacrifice being examined as important regardless of result, as father trying to free daughter, as creator trying to end horror, as person taking ultimate responsibility, being examined thoroughly, being understood as ambiguous but meaningful. Let this sacrifice rest. Understanding. Henry sacrificed himself, that he spoke to spirits, that he addressed William, that he apologized to Charlotte, that he burned building, that he died in fire, that success was ambiguous, being examined comprehensively, being ready to continue to final analysis, to understanding meaning, to examining what Henry represents, being explored after rest, after sleep, after letting sacrifice settle into understanding, being Henry's death examined thoroughly, being continued after rest. Part 6. The meaning of Henry. Understanding the tragic hero. As we approach final understanding, examining what Henry Emily means, what he represents, why his story matters, what themes his character embodies, being explored now as thematic analysis, as understanding symbolism, as comprehending significance beyond literal events. Creator, whose creation was corrupted. Henry representing creator whose work was perverted, whose innocent creation was corrupted into horror, whose technology meant for good was used for evil, being examined as theme of how creation can be corrupted, how good work can enable bad outcomes, how innocent dreams can become nightmares through others' evil. Henry creating animatronic entertainment with pure intentions, building characters meant to delight children, designing technology for joy, being corrupted by William, being perverted into murder weapons, into hiding places for bodies, into prisons for spirits. Henry's creation being completely corrupted, being totally perverted, being transformed from entertainment into horror. Henry representing creators whose work is used for purposes they never intended, whose technology enables evil they never wanted, whose innocent creations are corrupted by others' malice, being universal theme, being pattern that exists in real world, being creators feeling responsible for how work is used, feeling guilty for enabling harm even when harm wasn't intended, wasn't wanted, wasn't chosen. Henry representing this, being symbol of creator's guilt, of responsibility for unintended consequences, of feeling accountable for how creation is used even when use was perverted by others, being examined as important theme, as recognizing that creators bear some responsibility for creations, that technology can be corrupted, that innocent work can enable evil. Henry being symbol of this complexity, of creator's burden, of responsibility that comes with creation. Father's love and ultimate sacrifice. Henry representing father's love, representing parent who would do anything for child, representing ultimate sacrifice for daughter. Henry's entire trap being motivated by Charlotte, being designed to free her, being father's final act being liberation of child. Henry staying in burning building, being ensuring daughter could rest, being sacrifice for Charlotte, being death to give daughter peace. Henry representing parental love that extends beyond death, beyond limits, beyond self-preservation, being father who would burn himself and everything he created to free child, being examined as ultimate expression of parental love, as father's complete devotion, as parent prioritizing child over everything including own life. Henry being examined as good father, as loving parent, as person whose relationship with Charlotte was healthy, was genuine, was defined by love rather than neglect, being stark contrast to William, being good father versus bad father, being loving parent versus neglectful parent, being person who sacrificed for child versus person who destroyed children. Henry and William being examined as contrasting fathers, as two parents with opposite approaches, opposite priorities, opposite relationships with children. Henry representing parental love done right, being father who protected, who loved, who ultimately sacrificed self for child, being examined as ideal of fatherhood taken to extreme, being parent willing to die for child, being love absolute, being devotion complete. Partner betrayed, trust destroyed. Henry representing person betrayed by partner, representing trust destroyed, representing friendship corrupted if friendship existed, representing professional relationship revealed as collaboration with evil. Henry trusting William, partnering with William, building business with William, not knowing partner was monster, not suspecting his evil, not understanding his darkness, discovering William killed Charlotte being complete betrayal, being destruction of trust, being revelation that partnership was corrupted, that person he worked with was murderer, that collaboration enabled horror. Henry representing people betrayed by those they trust, representing victims of trust given to wrong person, representing destruction when partnership is revealed as collaboration with evil, being examined as theme of betrayal, of trust destroyed, of discovering that person you worked with, that person you trusted, that person you partnered with was evil all along, was corrupting what you built, was using what you created for horror. Henry's betrayal by William being examined as profound, as complete, as not just professional betrayal, but personal betrayal, as partner killing Henry's daughter, as friend murdering Henry's child, as person Henry trusted most committing worst crime against what Henry loved most, being betrayal multiplied, being trust destroyed completely, being relationship revealed as corruption. Henry representing victims of profound betrayal, representing people who discover they collaborated with evil unknowingly, representing those who trusted wrong person, being examined as important theme, as recognizing danger of trust, recognizing that evil can hide, recognizing that betrayal destroys. Guilt and responsibility, taking accountability. Henry representing person who takes responsibility even for others' crimes. When those crimes used his work, Henry feeling guilty for William's murders because murders used Henry's technology, occurred at Henry's restaurants, corrupted Henry's creations. Henry feeling responsible even though he didn't commit crimes, even though evil was William's, even though he was victim of betrayal rather than perpetrator of horror. Henry, representing people who take responsibility beyond what's fair, who feel guilty for outcomes they didn't choose, who accept accountability for consequences of their work even when work was corrupted by others, being examined as complex theme, as exploring responsibility of creators, as questioning how guilty person should feel for how creation is used, whether innocent creator bears responsibility for corruption of creation. Henry representing taking maximum responsibility, accepting complete guilt, choosing to sacrifice self to fix problem even though problem wasn't his fault, being examined as extreme case, as person who felt so responsible that he chose death, who took so much accountability that he destroyed himself and everything he created, being examined as perhaps excessive, as perhaps Henry taking more responsibility than was fair, feeling more guilt than was deserved, but being understandable, being human response, being pattern of good people feeling responsible for evil that touches their work, their lives, their creations. Henry representing this, being symbol of creator's guilt, of responsibility taken even when not fully deserved, of accountability beyond what's required, being examined as important character trait, as defining element of Henry, as motivation for sacrifice, hero through destruction, saving by burning. Henry representing hero who saves through destruction, who liberates through fire, who frees spirits by burning them, who ends horror by eliminating everything including himself, being unconventional hero, being person who destroys rather than builds, who burns rather than creates, who eliminates rather than saves in traditional sense. Henry's heroism being examined as destructive, as saving through destroying, as liberation through elimination, as freeing spirits by burning animatronics that contain them, being paradoxical heroism, being hero who helps by hurting, who saves by destroying, who provides freedom through fire. Henry representing heroes who must destroy to save, who must eliminate to liberate, who must burn to free, being examined as complex heroism, as not simple, as not traditional, as requiring destruction of what was built, as necessitating elimination of what was created. Henry representing difficult heroism, complex salvation, paradoxical liberation, being hero through destruction, being examined as unique, as important, as representing that sometimes saving requires destroying, sometimes liberation requires elimination, sometimes ending horror requires burning everything. Henry being symbol of this, being hero who destroyed, being savior who burned, being person who saved by eliminating, being examined thoroughly as complex hero, as person whose heroism required destruction, whose salvation required fire, whose liberation required burning everything, including himself. Let these meanings rest. Understanding Henry as symbol of creator corrupted, as father who loved completely, as partner betrayed, as person taking maximum responsibility, as hero who saved through destruction, being examined thoroughly as thematic figure, as meaningful character, being ready to continue to conclusion, to final rest, to honoring Henry's sacrifice, being explored after rest, after sleep, after letting meanings settle, being Henry's significance examined, being continued after rest. Conclusion. Honoring Henry's sacrifice and final rest. As we reach conclusion of this comprehensive exploration, gathering all threads of Henry Emily's story, understanding his complete journey from innocent dreamer to sacrificial hero, from creator to destroyer, from partner to betrayed, from father to griever to liberator. Henry being examined completely now, being understood thoroughly, his story being told from beginning to end, from Fredbear's family diner to burning pizzeria, from partnership with William to confrontation in fire, from Charlotte's birth to Charlotte's liberation, from dream to nightmare to sacrifice, being Henry Emily's complete story, being told compassionately, being examined with recognition of tragedy, being understood as heroic despite complexity, as meaningful despite ambiguity, as important despite being often overlooked. Henry deserving recognition, deserving understanding, deserving honor for sacrifice, being examined now in conclusion, being honored, being remembered, being recognized as hero, as father, as creator, as person who tried to fix what was broken even though he didn't break it, who took responsibility even though evil wasn't his, who sacrificed himself to free spirits, to end horror, to liberate daughter, being Henry Emily, being tragic hero, being examined completely, being ready now for final rest, for honoring his memory, for recognizing his importance. The complete arc, dreamer to destroyer. Henry Emily's journey beginning as dreamer, as creator with vision of bringing joy through technology, as engineer who wanted to entertain children, as person with pure intentions building animatronic entertainment, as innocent optimist creating something good. Henry partnering with William, building Fredbear's family diner, creating Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, establishing business, being successful, being validated, watching dream work, seeing children happy, experiencing satisfaction of creation bringing joy, being father to Charlotte, loving daughter completely, creating security puppet to protect her, being good parent, being devoted father, being person whose life was good, whose dream was working, whose future seemed bright, then Charlotte being murdered, William being revealed as killer, partner betraying trust, daughter dying, dream being corrupted, horror beginning, Henry transforming from dreamer to griever, from creator to person carrying guilt, from innocent to person burdened by responsibility, 5 more children dying, Henry's animatronics being used to lure them, to hide them, to contain their spirits, Henry's technology being completely corrupted, being perverted into horror, being used for evil, Henry living with this for decades, carrying guilt for 40 years, planning eventually, designing trap comprehensively, creating Lefty to capture Charlotte, designing labyrinth to prevent escape, planning salvage system to gather animatronics, preparing for sacrifice, accepting death, choosing to die to ensure trap worked, giving speech acknowledging spirits, confronting William, apologizing to Charlotte, burning everything, staying in building as fire consumed all, dying to free spirits, dying to destroy William, dying to liberate Charlotte, dying to end horror, Henry's complete arc being examined as journey from innocence to guilt to sacrifice, from dreamer to destroyer, from creator to eliminator, from person who built everything to person who burned everything, being transformation complete, being arc finished, being story from beginning to end being told completely. The good man in evil. Situation Henry being examined as fundamentally good person, as someone with right motivations, pure intentions, genuine desire to create happiness. Henry never being evil, never being corrupt, never being villain, being victim of William's evil, being person whose good work was corrupted by partner's crimes, being creator whose innocent creation enabled horror. Henry being examined as good man in evil situation, as person trying to do right thing, as creator attempting to bring joy, as father loving daughter, as partner trusting friend, as person being betrayed, being used, being having creation corrupted, being losing daughter, being watching horror continue, being living with guilt, being eventually sacrificing self, being good person throughout, being never becoming villain, never becoming evil, remaining fundamentally good, even while carrying immense guilt, even while destroying everything, even while choosing death. Henry being examined as good, as sympathetic, as person deserving compassion not condemnation, deserving understanding not judgment, deserving recognition as hero not accomplice. Henry being good man whose work was corrupted, whose dream was perverted, whose partner was evil, whose daughter was murdered, whose life was destroyed by another's crimes, being examined as victim, as person who suffered because of William, because of partner's evil, because of trust betrayed. Henry being good throughout, being person who tried to fix things, who took responsibility, who sacrificed himself, being hero, being examined as such, being recognized as good man, as tragic hero, as person who deserved better but made best of terrible situation. Father who freed his daughter, Henry's ultimate motivation being Charlotte, being daughter, being freeing her spirit, being liberating child from mechanical prison, being father's final act, being giving daughter peace. Trap being designed for Charlotte primarily, being motivated by need to free her, being driven by father's love, being sacrifice being for daughter, being speech being to daughter, being Henry's death being to ensure daughter could rest, being examined as central motivation, as primary purpose, as everything being about Charlotte, about freeing her, about liberating spirit of murdered child. Henry being father first, being parent above all, being person whose daughter mattered most, whose love for Charlotte drove everything, motivated trap, motivated sacrifice, motivated death. Henry dying to free Charlotte being examined as ultimate expression of parental love, as father giving everything for child, as parent sacrificing self to give daughter peace, being examined as beautiful despite tragedy, as meaningful despite sadness, as Henry's death having purpose because it freed Charlotte, because it liberated daughter, because it gave child rest after decades of suffering. Henry being examined as father who succeeded in most important way, freeing daughter, being parent who ensured child could rest, being person who put Charlotte first, who prioritized daughter over everything including own life, being examined as good father, as loving parent, as person whose relationship with Charlotte defined him, motivated him, drove him to sacrifice, being father who freed daughter, being examined as most important element of Henry's story, as central meaning, as primary purpose being liberating Charlotte. Creator who took responsibility, Henry, being examined as creator who took responsibility for how creation was used, who felt accountable for corruption of his work, who accepted guilt for technology enabling horror, who chose to destroy what he built to end what it enabled, being examined as taking ultimate responsibility, as going beyond what was required, as feeling more guilt than was deserved, but acting on that guilt comprehensively, as destroying self and creation to fix problem that wasn't his fault. Henry representing creators who accept responsibility, who take accountability seriously, who recognize that creation has consequences, that technology can be corrupted, that work can enable unintended outcomes. Henry taking maximum responsibility, accepting complete accountability, choosing to destroy everything to end horror, being examined as extreme case, as person who went furthest in taking responsibility, who sacrificed everything including life to fix problem. To end horror, his creation enabled. Henry being examined as model of responsibility taken seriously, of accountability accepted fully, of creator recognizing that creation has consequences and accepting those consequences even to point of death, being examined as important character trait, as defining element, as Henry being person who took responsibility, who accepted accountability, who destroyed self to fix problem, being ultimate expression of creator's responsibility. Henry's legacy, what he created and destroyed. Henry's legacy being examined as complex, as mixture of creation and destruction, as both building entertainment empire and burning it, as both bringing joy to children and watching that joy corrupted into horror, as both innocent dream and nightmare ending. Henry creating animatronic entertainment, building business, designing characters children loved, bringing families to restaurants, providing happiness, being positive legacy, being genuine contribution, being something good, but also being corrupted, being perverted, being used for evil, being legacy of innocent creation that enabled horror, of good work that facilitated bad outcomes, of dream that became nightmare, but also being legacy of taking responsibility, of eventual sacrifice, of burning everything to end horror, of dying to free spirits, of heroism, of father saving daughter, of creator destroying creation, of person choosing death to fix problem. Henry's legacy being examined as both positive and negative, as both creation and corruption, as both dream and nightmare, as both innocent beginning and sacrificial ending, being examined as complex legacy, as mixture of good and bad, as person who created something wonderful that was corrupted into something terrible, who then destroyed everything including himself to end the terrible, being complete legacy, being understood as complex, as meaningful despite complexity, as important despite mixture of outcomes. Henry being remembered for creation and destruction, for dream and sacrifice, for being creator and destroyer, for being father who loved and sacrificed, for being partner betrayed, for being hero who saved through burning, being examined as complete legacy, as Henry Emily's full impact, as what he created and what he destroyed, as dream and nightmare and sacrifice. Permission to rest completely, honoring Henry, and now, with Henry Emily's complete story told, with creator's full tragedy explored, with father's sacrifice examined, with hero's death understood, with comprehensive exploration finished, you can rest completely, can sleep deeply, can drift into peaceful dreams, knowing Henry's story, knowing his tragedy, knowing his heroism, knowing his sacrifice, knowing his love for Charlotte, knowing his guilt, knowing his responsibility taken, knowing his death chosen to free spirits, knowing Henry Emily from beginning to end, from dreamer to destroyer, from innocent creator to sacrificial hero, being able to rest with complete understanding, to sleep with comprehensive knowledge, being finished with examination, being done with exploration, being Henry honored, being hero recognized, being father's sacrifice understood, being ready to sleep completely, to rest deeply, to dream peacefully, being far from tragedy, being distant from horror, being safe in sleep, knowing Henry's story is told, knowing his sacrifice is recognized, knowing his heroism is understood, being protected by knowing this is fiction, by understanding story is complete, by recognizing Henry as tragic hero, as good man who suffered, as father who loved, as creator who destroyed, as person who sacrificed, everything. Being honored now, being remembered, being recognized, being Henry Emily's story complete, being examination finished, being able to rest completely. Final gratitude and gentle farewell. Thank you for joining this complete exploration of Henry Emily's story, for staying through his tragedy, through his creation and corruption, through his guilt and sacrifice, for caring about understanding this overlooked hero, for wanting to know his complete story, for recognizing his importance, for being here through comprehensive examination of Henry Emily, of creator, of father, of hero, of person who sacrificed everything. Thank you for listening, for understanding, for honoring Henry's memory, for recognizing his tragedy and his heroism. Sleep now, completely, finally, deeply, peacefully, knowing Henry Emily's complete story, knowing creator's full tragedy, knowing father's ultimate sacrifice, knowing hero's final act, knowing everything about Henry from beginning to end, from Fredbear's family diner to burning pizzeria, from Charlotte's birth to Charlotte's liberation, from dream to nightmare to sacrifice, being complete understanding, being comprehensive knowledge, being finished with examination, being ready to sleep deeply, to rest peacefully, to dream calmly, being far from Henry's tragedy, being distant from his suffering, being safe in sleep, knowing story is told, knowing hero is honored, knowing sacrifice is recognized, being protected by fiction, being blessed with distance from horror, being able to rest, knowing Henry tried, knowing he succeeded in freeing Charlotte possibly, knowing he sacrificed himself heroically, knowing he was good man who suffered because of evil man's crimes, knowing he took responsibility, knowing he died to end horror, being finished now, being complete now, being ready to sleep deeply, peacefully, completely, finally, being Henry Emily's story told, being creator's tragedy honored, being father's sacrifice recognized, being hero's death understood. Good night. Sleep deeply. Dream peacefully. Henry's story is told. The hero is honored. His sacrifice matters. He freed his daughter. Good night.